In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use and create stored procedures. Now, stored procedures are probably my favorite part about SQL Server. And some people kind of shy away from stored procedures, but I'm going to push you to use stored procedures as much as possible. So let's first start by looking at what is a stored procedure. Let's go over to SSMS, and here we have our timesheets database. Now, if we look under programmability, this folder, if we expand this out, inside here is stored procedures. Now, currently there are none, so I right-click on stored procedures and I say new stored procedure. And you get a whole screen full of text. Don't panic. Okay? First of all, the first 11 lines can be deleted. This just says that this text right here was created using a template. Well, no problem. Go ahead and get rid of that. Now, these two statements here are just best practices that Microsoft includes. The ANSI nulls on and the code identifiers on. Okay, so we can leave those alone. Don't worry about them. So for now, since we're just doing this for demo, I'm going to go ahead and delete that so we can kind of clean this up. And then we're also going to delete this. This is just example stuff. Okay, it's saying, here's what you could do. Well, that's cool. Great, whatever. And then down here, this right here explains why we have this record. So these two comment lines explain that we set no count on so that we don't return extra information. And I'll explain that in a minute. We'll take out the comment. We'll leave the set no count on alone. And then down here we have a sample select statement or also a prompt for maybe an insert statement. We can go ahead and delete that. Up here, we have a prompt for give us the name of the stored procedure. Let's go ahead and delete that. And in fact, we can even delete this if we wanted to, but we'll leave it alone. No, let's go ahead and delete it. No reason to have it and clutter up our view. I don't want you to get confused by extra stuff. So right now, we have this very, very stripped down procedure statement. So what this is going to be is it's going to be any type of query that we can run. A select query, an insert query, an update query, or a delete query. All those we've done, this can do all of those. It can actually do a whole lot more, but we're going to concentrate on the, again, 80% of what you need to know, which is that this can do those 4 types. So how do we create one first, and then why do we use them? So let's create one first. Let's create a pretty simple one. Let's do DBO dot, because you have to put a database owner. That should be standard. So DBO dot, and this is the name of the stored procedure. I call mine SP customer lookup. Now, do not call it SP underscore to start it off. The reason why is because SQL Server has reserved SP underscore for its stored procedures. And if you use this, it's going to look for this stored procedure in this database and also the master database. And you could actually step on the toes of something Microsoft has done. So don't do that. So SP is fine. SP customer lookup. Now I'm not going to put anything on line 3 for now. Right now, this is going to be simply a select star from dbo.customers. And that's it. I've now created, once I run this, I've created a stored procedure. And when I say run this, I do mean we hit the execute button or hit F5. When we do this, what happens is it actually creates the stored procedure. If I refresh now, I have one stored procedure, dbo.sp customer lookup. Let's go to a new query window. I'll put my spaces in. I'll also hit my Control-Shift-R to make sure I've refreshed. Now to execute a stored procedure, you do not do a select. You say exec for execute. dbo.sp customer lookup. So you're saying execute this stored procedure. If we run this, we now have our results from our customer table. So why would we ever use a stored procedure when a view could do the same thing? Well, first of all, the reason why, and the reason that I love stored procedures so much, is because you can limit your database to only allow people to use stored procedures. You tell them basically you can't use tables, you can't use views, you can't access things directly, you can't do a select star from dbo.customers. You can only call stored procedures. And you can give somebody a login that only has stored procedure access. Why is that important? Well, then they can only do what you've allowed them to do. So if you want to allow them to do a select star from DBO customers, but not to delete from DBO customers, you just don't create a stored procedure that does deleting. Simple. So it's a really powerful way to lock down your database. Often you'll hear about databases that are susceptible to SQL injection attacks. Stored procedures make it much more difficult to have SQL injection attacks because you're not giving them access to your tables or views if you lock it down that way. Now, there still is some issue with SQL injection if you don't create your procedures right. But if you lock them down properly and if you don't allow bad data through, then you're almost guaranteed not to have a SQL injection attack. And in case you don't know what a SQL injection attack is, basically when you have say on the web, you have a new customer creation where a person fills in their first name and last name and it creates a customer record in your database from the website. Well, in their last name, so they have, let's just put down here, I'll put in comments so it doesn't cause any errors. So for the last name field, they say my last name is Corey semicolon delete from dbo.customers. Now, remember the semicolon is the end of a statement in SQL. So if we were to just pass this entire string in without looking at it first into SQL, if we don't handle it properly, it would end whatever statement we're doing the insert with. It would end that and then run the next SQL statement, which is delete from DBO customers with no where clause. Therefore, all of our customers are now gone. That's SQL injection. And one of the major ways to prevent that is to screen the data coming into your database. But another part of that is to not allow access to your database directly, but only through stored procedures. So that's one of the reasons why I love stored procedures. The other reason why is because remember those execution plans. Remember how I said that SQL develops that plan, that guess, and then runs the query. Well, that guess, creating it, takes time. Now, again, it's minuscule time, but it is time. In fact, it can sometimes take more time to create the plan than it does to execute the plan. So, with that being said, stored procedures take us to the next level because they're pre-compiled, meaning there's a plan set in the database already for what to do when this execution plan gets run. SQL doesn't have to create the plan. It already knows what the plan is. It's already figured that out because it knows that a store procedure does this. This store procedure does a select star from customers. It creates that plan once, it stores it, it remembers it. Next time we need to run this store procedure, it just calls the same plan. So it's optimized, it's faster. Now, SQL in general has gotten a lot better at optimizing ad hoc queries like this. So if you just were to pass in this, it may already have a plan for this. And so it may actually be as fast as this store procedure. But it's only a maybe. And there's a lot of quirks with it and issues. I'm not saying SQL's not great at this. They're amazing at guessing what you're going to want and keeping that information and then using those stored plans. And there's a whole system for how they do it based upon usage. So if you use this query only once in a while, it'll probably get kicked out of the system because it needs the memory. Whereas if you use this every day, multiple times a day, more likely it will have remembered that and said, you need this plan in memory because you use it all the time. So SQL is very intelligent, but we can help SQL out by using stored procedures because they're pre-compiled. Now, right now, this is no different than a view. But we can make an improvement to this by saying, don't give me all the customers. This is a customer lookup. Give me only specific customers. We could say where ID equals something. Now, what do we want to equal? Well, let's pass in a variable. Right up here, between the create and the as, I'm going to say at customer ID int. Now, what I'm saying is that this customer lookup, you have to pass it a customer ID. And the type for that customer ID is an int. Now I can use this variable down here at customer ID. So now we're only going to get back the customer record for the ID that we asked for. So the variable is whatever name you want it to be. The type needs to match the type that we need. In this case, I'm matching it against the ID field, which is an int. Therefore, we have to pass in an int. Now notice if I zoom in right now, I moused over ID and it gave me the fact that it's the primary key and that it's of type int. Therefore, I know what type I need when I'm creating a variable. Now, if I were to run this right now, I'd get an error. And the error says there is already an object named SP customer lookup in the database. So how do I modify this query? Well, right now it says create procedure and the name. If we change this create to alter procedure and the name. Let's run this. Again, I'm not highlighting anything. If I highlight this, I'm running the select statement, not the alter statement. So make sure nothing's highlighted or everything is. Run this, and now the command is completed successfully. If I come back over here and I try to run this as is, it says, I'm sorry, you can't do that. It expects the parameter at customer ID, which was not supplied. How do I supply it? Well, I put space and then let's pass in a 3. If I run this, it gives me Acme because Acme has a customer ID of 3. If I pass in 4, it says, oops. If I pass in 4, there we go. It says there's ABC Incorporated. So we can also say at customer ID equals 3 and run this. Why is that important? Well, we may not know the order or may want to change the order of the variables. By saying at customer ID equals, we tell it this, the 3 goes into this variable. That's also explicit for us to see where 3 goes. If I just put 3, what it relies on is the order of these variables. Now, right now we only have 1. But if I wanted more than 1, I could say comma and then say at and something else. It's just a comma separated list. So let's leave this one alone for now. We've created a lookup for customers based upon their customer ID. Now let's create a new store procedure. So right click and say new stored procedure. Get rid of all the stuff we don't need. Oh, one more thing before I go on. This no count on. If this was off, when I run this, it would say, here's the number of records returned, as well as this. Sometimes having both returned can cause a problem. And so by default, they include this in the template to say set no count to be on. So that's just, typically I just leave it on. But if you had a case where you wanted to know how many records were modified or how many records were returned, then you'd have to set no count to be off. All right, let's clean up all the stuff that's not needed. Now, I'm doing this because this is easy for you to do. Deleting things is easy. Remembering syntax is hard. And so I would encourage you, do this method. Don't be afraid to use this template. Right click, new store procedure. Okay? So, and then delete all the extra stuff and use this. But if you want to memorize, create procedure, the name, any variables as begin, my code, and go. If you want to memorize that, that's perfectly fine as well. So, create procedure DBO dot, let's do insert customer. Oops, let's do SP customer underscore insert. And this is a naming convention that some people adopt where you give the name of a table if it's just one table. So SP customer and then the action you're doing. Insert, read, or get all, stuff like that. So if you want to adopt that, that's fine. The nice thing with this method is it groups then all the SP customers together. And then you can see all the actions you can do against the customers table by just looking at that particular portion of the store procedure list. So SP customer insert. Now let's down here real quick. Select star from dbo.customers. All right. So we have to insert the company name, the phone number, and the email address. The rest gets generated automatically. So I need to know, passing in at company name. Now, what type is this? Well, this is a text type of some kind. So in this case, I actually right-click on customers and say design and go, okay, it's a varchar 100. I might even copy that and come back over here and paste it because that's the type you want. You want to limit it to the same number of characters as the table does because I could put varchar 200 here. But when I go to insert, it's going to truncate after 100 characters, meaning it's going to lop off characters number 101 through 200. So company name varchar 100. And then phone number at phone number. Every variable has to start with the at symbol. Now phone number is varchar 20. Email address is varchar 100 again. So varchar 20 for phone number and at email address is varchar 100. So now I have three variables being passed in. Company name, phone number, and email address. I'm going to insert or create a new customer. Let's get rid of our select from. So, do you remember how to do insert statements? Insert into dbo.customers, and then our three columns, company name, phone number, email address, values, then parens are three values, which are at company name, at phone number, at email address, semicolon. How easy is that? Now, if I execute this, I've created a SP customer insert store procedure. Let's close out some other stuff. Let's go back to here. Let's comment out this for now. Let's do a select star from customer, select star from dbo.customers, and run this just so we can see we have two customer records. Now, we can say exec dbo dot, and that sp, the store procedure is not in the list, so Control-Shift-R. And now I can do dot, and there we go, sp customer underscore insert. And if I do a space, it says the first one's company name. So how about a company name of Danger Inc. Now a phone number. Well, why not? 555-9985. And then email address at danger@ismymiddlename.com. Oops, no parens there. Okay, So we've got those 3 variables in the right order, so I don't have to specify which the variable name is. But if I run this, it says completed successfully. Now if I do a select statement, I see that I have 3 records, including Danger Inc. So that's all there is to an insert store procedure. I could do a delete. I could do a update. I could do a more complex select. Now the only thing you can't do with store procedures, or at least not in any rational or sane way of doing it, is you can't say select from SP, whatever. You can't select from a store procedure. So you can't join on it and all the rest. Typically, the store procedure is your last entry before the customer, before whatever program uses your SQL Server, or whatever user uses your SQL Server. Whatever it is, your store procedure is the last thing before that happens. So your views can be a stepping stone. You can have a view, and they can have another view and add them together and create a third view and all the rest. But the last thing before data goes out of your SQL Server or comes into it is your store procedure. So just know that you can't do a select. As in, you can't say, I want to connect 2 store procedures. Inside of a store procedure, you can definitely do a select. So that's store procedures. They are by far my favorite part of SQL Server, just because of their power. I love the fact that I can lock things down to only store procedures. So, for example, if I didn't want to allow people to update the company name, I just don't have to do an update statement for customers. Or I could say update customers, but don't include that in the update set statement. So really powerful stuff. It's something that I rely on to give me that added layer of security beyond, all the stuff that I have in place. So I would encourage you to try them out, use them if at all possible in your environment when you start actually building production databases, and definitely practice. So with that in mind, let's go right to the homework.